Stranger than Dracula, more fantastic than Frankenstein, and more mysterious than the Invisible Man. Karloff the Uncanny in The Mummy. 1932, way back when. Another Universal monster flick starring none other than Boris Karloff, coming off of the success of 1931's Frankenstein. Universal decided to create The Mummy. It's an interesting film. Most people know the Mummy property from the 1999 film, but today we're watching 1932's. Let's see how it goes, and then let's get into the good, the bad, the ugly, and the iconic. Enjoy. All right, so we just finished watching 1932's The Mummy, starring Boris Karloff. Pretty good film overall, I'd say. What do you think, DJ?
Not bad.
Yeah, it was all right. Probably not my favorite of the ones that we've seen so far, but not bad by any means at all.
I think it took a few things that some of the other ones did poorly, did better, did some of the things weird. We'll get more into it, but it's almost kind of opposite what we've seen so far.
Yeah, kind of. So anyway, we're just going to roll right into it. Let's get into the good, the bad, the ugly, and the iconic, starting out with the good. DJ.
For me, and I know we're compared to the other films, but specifically compared to the other films,
yeah,
this one takes a lot of some of the plot points that roughs the other ones, and it smooths them up a little bit. I liked the character drama a little bit. Some of that stuff is a little better in this one than some of the other ones we've seen, and it's really nice, entertaining, and it ends a little smoother.
That's fair. For me, I think the good is actually the cinematography. They did a really good job shooting all of the different scenes. It's all very smooth. Like that was an issue that we had watching Frankenstein, where some of the cuts would just jump. The characters would just jump and like phase on screen. The Mummy did a really good job. It's very smoothly filmed, very smoothly choreographed. Everything works very, very well as far as the shots. Like from, the intro scene with that really great visual with the pyramid on the title screen, all the way through to the end. It flows. It's visually pleasing.
Okay.
So I would go with that as my good. How about bad?
So for me, and I'm going to have a little bit of tough time between the good and the ugly on this one, because I'm not really sure where the time comes in. But for bad, it suffers a little bit from weird fade outs. Almost every one of the major scene cuts ends with a fade.
Right.
And it fades out when characters are still doing things, still talking, things are still happening, including the end. The very end, it shows the body of the mummy and it just fades to black, like so fast.
Yeah, it should have lingered on that shot a little bit more.
There's a lot of these cuts where I'm not sure if that's... I know it's not actually a product of the time, because the first two movies we watched don't do that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they were trying to save film, or maybe they didn't cut properly or leave the shots long enough. But those fade cuts just kind of throw me off, because there's something's going on and then it's gone. That dug at me a little bit.
I can understand that for sure.
I don't know why it bothered me so bad, but it really did.
Yeah. I mean, you were getting after it.
I was getting after it while we're watching. I'm like, why does it keep doing that? It was like the eyes, Bela Lugosi's eyes.
Yeah, right. Okay, for me, the bad, I'm going to have to go with the chemistry between our two romantic leads.
That's a fair one.
I don't think that they had very good chemistry. It might be the actor behind it. It might be the actress. It might be the fact that she very clearly is not happy.
She looks angry like the whole time.
Yeah, she looks very...
Why am I here? I don't want to act anymore. Yeah. That's literally the attitude she pushes off the whole time.
And that's probably
especially
because
some of the other female leads that were so good in the other ones.
Well, yeah, the other two female leads in the last, like, even Frankenstein, the issue with the female lead in Frankenstein is she's not very prominent. She doesn't really do much. Nina in Frankenstein had, like, her own fleshed out personality. She was very interesting. We actually, we talked about it.
And Dracula, you mean?
Oh, sorry, Dracula.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nina in Dracula. She had very good. She was very lively. She had her own character. She seemed to be her own person.
Right.
And she developed a lot. And honestly, Harker was the worst part of that relationship. He didn't seem to fit in. It might be the actor, because it's the same guy. It's the same actor that played.
And this
Harker.
one, it felt more to me like she was just disinterested, but maybe,
Yeah.
but it was hard to tell. He seemed a little too eager, but you're right. The chemistry between them was rough.
Yeah, the chemistry was really rough. It felt really forced and really awkward.
Awkward is a good way to put it.
Yeah, because it was like he seemed to be coming on really, really strong at times, and she was not having it. And then she would say stuff that was like encouraging and trying to like say that this
And then
stuff
she
was
falls in
happening.
love with him anyway, which I can get. Some people might, but it just doesn't feel romantic. It feels just so forceful.
It just feels kind of shoot in. It
Yeah.
feels like there has to be some sort of romantic interest in the film. You know, it just
Right.
it seems like they had a formula in mind and they shoehorned in the relationship just for the sake of having that check a box.
Makes sense.
So yeah, rolling right along, we're cruising, man. Let's go ahead and what is the ugly for you in this film?
Okay, so for the ugly, I was mixing this with the fade cuts, but I think that's really not a product of the time because of what it is. For me, the ugly, like the product of the time, I think, is just the same exact thing the other two films suffered from, and that's like one take madness. Her with the dog.
Yeah.
The scene where she meets him for the first time. It's like we got to get this in one take, and it shows a little bit. Some of the dialogue scenes are a little rough. Some of the exposition and the other thing that goes along with that, I think was where I'm getting to for the ugly overall, is the exposition.
Yeah.
A lot of these older films, they can't show as much. Film is expensive, so they do a lot of exposition, newspaper exposition. The newspaper was actually pretty well better used in this one than other ones. The dialogue where they explain the plot and then they go 10 years later and then explain the plot that we literally explain the part we just saw.
Yeah.
Like they recorded this dialogue and they're like, that's really interesting. Maybe we should film that. And then went back and filmed the beginning.
That might have been what happened.
Because they literally explain exactly what we just watched. So, and that just seems like that's that product of the time issue where limited budget, limited film is expensive. We're just trying to do this as many takes. If we have new ideas, we just kind of shoehorn it in. We can't take out what we've already filmed. It's just it's a little messy. It's a little better done than some of the others, but it's still messy.
That's fair. I think overall the film itself kind of struggles a little bit just with exposition dumping. I think that's the ugly for me. Is just it feels like sometimes the movie grinds to a halt.
Yeah.
For the sake of let me explain.
Especially
this, and it's so complicated.
Yeah,
there's so many things that are happening in the story that are really, really complicated that they throw in minutes before the action takes place.
Yeah.
So if you kind of miss a little bit of dialogue, which unfortunately that's kind of going to be the product of you and I watching it, because we're also we're making fun of it, we're making light of it, and we're enjoying it in our unique way. But sometimes we miss a line, or we miss two lines, or something like that. And then suddenly they do something and it's like, did they actually explain that, why it's happening? Or was it just really thrown in like the minute before it happened?
So one of the things I'm actually able to do is while we're watching it, I actually can listen to the dialogue while we talk. Yeah. So I kind of keep an eye on some of the stuff. There are a few times where that happens, but for the most part, the dialogue doesn't really get it's really exposition heavy, but still confusing because they jump a lot.
Well, it's such a complicated plot.
Correct.
It's like a lot of the stuff that happens in the film it's a very, very interesting story. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not saying that the story is the ugly part. I'm saying that the way they went about it.
The way they executed
the way they executed it is kind of ugly.
Right.
It's one of those where you have to really pay attention to every little piece of dialogue. You have to pay attention to every little thing. And it's very hard sometimes to get into what is happening on screen. Not to like drive to like a different ugly or anything like that, but I think part of the issue is the female lead looks so disinterested that sometimes things are happening around her and you're just kind of like looking at her face and you're like, is she in this scene, or is she like mad at the director right now? Because that is one of the things. I looked up of some of the facts about the film before we watched it, and that actually is part of the trivia and stuff about this film. It constantly references the fact that the main female lead, I am forgetting her name right now, hated the director, hated working for him, was forced to work with him, and despised him.
You can tell that she doesn't want to be there too. That shows so much. Everyone else seems interested in doing this, and she's just like, oh, I hate this so much the whole time. And it shows, and it breaks it apart.
And unfortunately, she's the person we're following the entire time.
Yeah, and that against especially some of the other leads that we had in other films, it just kind of falls flat a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's get right into the iconic, though. What is it about this film that transcends time for you?
For me, I think I could say the Mummy himself, but I actually want to go with like the interpretation of the character. There's a lot of copying of Bela Lugosi's Dracula in this.
There's quite a bit.
They do the close-up shot of the face. They show the eyes.
Yeah.
They do that a lot, and it feels juxtaposed where they show the scene, then it shows the close-up of his face that you can tell was like filmed separately, similar to Bela Lugosi. They did that, but it was actually less annoying. It wasn't as up close, and it was more interesting because it almost looked dead rather than his like creepy engaged look. He looks dead. Like not just physically, but like inside. Like he just feels like he's almost ready to give up, but he doesn't want to quite give up on his time. Just those mimicking steps that they took to retread Dracula. Some of the scenes, the scene between him and Van Helsing, who he's just going to be called that forever now, mirrored the Dracula scene when he's discovering he's the mummy.
Yeah.
And then he brings up the papyrus. It's just like the mirror scene. And, but it's still so good because it's unique. It's still a different set of characters, different circumstances. And it just shows that conniving, like he's figuring it out. He's piecing it all together and he's puzzling it together. And it's a really, really good retread of Dracula. They even use the music from Dracula in the beginning.
It's the exact same.
This movie feels like they went, we want to make another Dracula because that was successful. How do we do it? Well, let's just make the mummy. Let's just make the Dracula, but we'll make it a mummy. And they retread a lot of the same plots, but it's more almost paying homage to it rather than copying it. They take the ideas, but you make them unique. Mm-hmm. And it culminates into an ending that is much smoother than either of the two ones we watched before. It gets a real ending, a real closure, and then it fades to black doubly.
Yeah.
All right, what about you?
I mean, the low-hanging fruit would be Boris Karloff as the mummy. I think he did a fantastic job. He does a great job with all of his creatures. Like with Frankenstein, I think wasn't he my iconic?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Do him. I kind of wanted to leave him open for you because you do such a great job of giving these characters their due, and I really had one I liked, which was the iconic copy of Dracula was just really cool for me. But.
Well, so how about I do two? All right, I'll give Karloff his due.
Okay.
And then I'll get into a new one just so I'm not the guy that's just like, oh, the best part about the mummy is the mummy. It's what it's called, the mummy.
It is. I was gonna say you should just go first so you can do it because oh my gosh, like he was great at this.
He is great.
Not just his acting, but the way the character is written.
The way the character is written, the way that he moves, the way he embodies the character.
Well, we'll just do this one together. So
yeah,
his dress.
Oh my gosh!
The fact that he comes out as a mummy, disappears,
yes.
And then he comes back later, all modernized and dressed nice, and he's trying to adapt to modern civilization. That is such a fun take on this character.
It really is.
All the newer mummy movies make it like the monster that's literally attacking, but he tries to he tries to emulate and integrate so that he can hide who he is, and get other people to sneakily do the work for him that he wants.
Right, and the fact that he doesn't allow people to touch him, because if they touch him or he touches them, he literally is like deteriorating still. Just the makeup that they put him in was just absolutely fantastic and stuff like that. We mentioned it as well. The costume design is very, very good.
Yes.
When he's wrapped up in the bandages, that was actually probably one of my favorite scenes in this entire film. Just the fact that he's wrapped, and it looks like he has been wrapped in this ancient cloth for centuries. And as he's moving, it's like it's falling apart, and there's sand and dirt and grime. It is such a cool shot.
Even the past scenes are really good, where it shows him in his origins, and he's like just a man there. He's not the mummy yet.
Oh, and the fact is he's different than when he is, like, because they show that he's wrinkled and he's still kind of deteriorating now.
But at the other time, when he's like just a normal person, he feels more human than Emotep. Like, we make the joke that he didn't fight back, but he almost seems like he's a little more cowardly, a little more human, and he's regretful. And now in his life, now that he's immortal, he's like, I want to make up for that. And it's just an iconic portrayal of the character.
Well, and I think too, the way that they wrote this Emotep is different than the one in 1999's Mummy.
Oh, significantly.
Very different. They're
that
both
one was
priests.
was more maniacal and like devious, whereas this one was truly just,
he was in love, and he went to the very extremes to save his love, to the point where he literally suffers being buried alive for her. And it's a very different motivation. It's a very different Mummy. Yeah. It's a very, very good story, though.
It's really good. It is a really good portrayal of him.
Yeah, and also the way that he talks, like the way that he does his ancient rituals and he speaks, it's all very menacing, and it sounds like it would be someone who's slower because he's been dead. You know, it's very good. He does a very good job. So
for your iconic,
for my iconic, my different iconic, I guess, I have to say the supernatural elements in this film. They really kind of leaned into it a little bit more, where they actually have, you know, the gods interacting with the world, the people and the priests and stuff like that are actually performing these ancient rituals and things like that. The fact that the statues move when they're doing the rituals really cool. And stuff.
Like the Isis with the Ankh, where she's like blasts the thing and lets it on fire, and then he dies.
Yep.
That was really cool. That whole thing was a really neat mark of this film.
Yeah, it's a very unique. It's a unique resolution, and the other thing is that the story itself and the way that it concludes is just really, really interesting. But all the supernatural elements in this film is something that even Dracula, if you think about, was missing.
No, that's a good point.
Because Dracula is a supernatural creature, and the way that he manipulates people and stuff like that.
That one was almost like we took the supernatural thing and dropped it in the modern world.
Yeah.
This one is, they are in the supernatural world. They are in Egypt. They are there, and so they're enamored with this stuff. So it's rather than Dracula going to their world, it's like them going to Dracula's world.
Yeah.
Which is almost kind of what it seems they tried to do with this, which is really good.
Yeah, so I have to say, like, the supernatural elements in the story, I think, are kind of iconic, where it actually goes into the fact that, you know, he is a supernatural creature. You can't kill him. Like they actually established very early on, human beings can't kill him. He's immortal.
Nope.
The only thing that can destroy him is Isis.
Or another one of the gods, or something else that is also supernatural.
But ultimately, Isis is the one that destroys him.
Correct.
So I just thought that was really cool, where it's out of the people's control. He has all the supernatural ability and stuff like that. He's really actively manipulating the world, and it comes to a supernatural conclusion.
Right.
I thought that was pretty cool. I don't think any film around that time was really leaning into that stuff.
That's an interesting take.
It might be one of the first films that does that.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go. What's next?
All right. How would we fix the film, and how would we make it for modern audiences? Obviously, the answer is I would cast somebody along the lines of Brendan Fraser. We would shoot it in 1999.
Honestly, I don't know if I could do the modern one without, because well, the thing about the 1999 Mummy is that it's more adventurous. But if I were to make this for modern audiences,
Yeah,
with like this, because I know you're joking, but at the same time, you're not wrong. Like that action, people want more action stuff. The 2017 Mummy, which kind of missed the mark, but was an interesting take as well. That was like the modern take.
Well, and the thing is, the issue with 2017's Mummy is they almost leaned a little too far into the action.
Yeah.
Like the 1999 Mummy, like I love that film. It will come up thousands of times, I'm sure. But the nice part about that film is that it is supernatural and stuff like that, but they add a little bit of the action scene into it. So it's a very, very good blend.
The second one gets heavy on the action, but the first one is pretty good with balancing it. What I would do with this film to fix it first is clean up. This is the same thing that I feel like we're doing with every one of these films, is clean up the cuttings. When you got a budget where you can just clean this up, is cut it a little smoother, cut out the exposition and show rather than tell.
Yeah.
Dracula did a really good job of that. Dracula was actually less expositioning than some of the others. It had a little bit at the beginning, but it showed a lot. Or when it did the exposition, it did it in a really clever way. Like somebody was watching and describing what they're seeing rather than
someone
just
was
telling.
actually reading the newspaper.
Right.
Someone was
Rather than just telling the other characters what's happening, they're acting and doing something that explains it.
Yeah.
Still a little exposition-y, but better. A little more of that maybe. Like just do when that newspaper article was showing, like so someone reading it may have been a little more fun. Although that was a scene we kind of made fun of in Dracula. The reason was not because they were reading the newspaper. It was because it would have been way more fun to show that scene.
Yeah, it would have been. It would have had a bigger impact to show that scene. Like
and this one, the newspaper scene doesn't really have that high of an impact to show. It's just literally they discovered it. Here it is.
It's just explaining the fact that they're going from this part of Egypt to another part of Egypt.
Yeah, which is easy to do.
And that's also an easy scene to throw
cuts, the fade cuts, the hard cuts. I would just smooth it out. That's really all that needs to be done. The plot in this one is actually pretty solid. The lead needs to be better into it, and I don't know if that's her fault or his fault because I don't know what was between them that was making them this way. But that needed some cleanup. So what about you? Like, what kind of things would you hit? Because that's my big plot points is that cuts, just smoothing it out a little bit.
I think I would explain a little bit more of the mummy's motivations and stuff because I don't think the motivations
they do,
really
but they wait till the end of the film to
it comes out like in the end or like halfway.
I kind of hint. I mean, I got it. I don't know if that's because I watched the newer ones or because I just kind of picked it up. But when he's going into when he tells them about the tomb to release her, and then he's there trying to raise her. Yeah, I'm like, I kind of know what he's doing. He wants her. I don't know why, but could probably guess that he was in love with her.
That's
it's
fair.
Kind of seriously hinted at, and I kind of picked it up. But yeah, I mean, if we're gonna clean it up a little bit, we could make that a little clearer. I could get behind that.
I don't really know. Like the thing is that this film is very good on its own.
The other two suffered significantly from major issues in cutting. This one, even though it still cuts it up really hard, just like the others, the plot flows a little smoother in this one. Even though it hard stops, it still flows smoother.
Yeah,
it's a little better. You can tell they're getting better at this point.
Yeah. I would fix the romance.
Yeah.
I would fix how the characters meet and how they interact and how they don't just fall in love immediately, love at first sight kind of thing. Have them meet at the party, have them socialize, have them be goofy. You know, like
if you had them meet at the party, it would have actually helped significantly because it would have made it flow over time a little smoother than be so sudden.
Yeah, like have a thing where maybe Frank, I was about to call him Harker. But Frank
Harker and Van Helsing, man. It's Harker and Van Helsing.
Right? I would have had them meet, like be introduced at the dance, at the party, and they socialize and stuff like that. It's a little awkward and things like that. He just made this amazing discovery and stuff like that, but maybe she's not super interested in those kind of things, and they talk and they interact, and then when she gets hypnotized, he takes it as, oh, we're leaving the party. She's leading me somewhere interesting or something like that, or she wants to see the museum, and he's like, oh, she's actually interested in my discovery.
I actually would have been interested if he went with her,
Yeah.
and then that whole scene still happens where she drops, but they've been spending the whole night together, so he's kind of enamored with her. Because I can get behind like falling for someone quickly, but
and also it's film,
it quickly doesn't have to be instantly.
Yeah.
Quickly can be over the course of a single night. Like that, spending a single night with someone is enough to become infatuated enough to want to get to know them better. Like that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then after, and they spend like several days throughout this, it kind of shows, and they're, after several days of them spending a lot of time together, that would make the romance stronger. Like they would start falling for each other because they just spend a lot of time together. Same reason people have like summer flings and stuff. They just spend a lot of time together and then they get pulled apart.
Yeah, so I would fix their relationship a little bit, make it more interesting, make it feel a little more natural, not as forced. Because sometimes it really was. He seemed to be forcing himself on her, and then she just kind of relented, or she would come off kind of strong, and he was like, "Oh."
That's another thing too that I would actually even move on. I mean, we don't have to end here, but I just for the modern audience thing too, same thing. Like that kind of romance thing just doesn't work. You really gotta ham that up a little bit and give more relevance and realisticness to it.
Yeah.
So that's a change I would do for both to fix this and for modern audiences, is clean that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see, I had something else. It really seemed like Frank's character was not actually interested in what he was doing or an expert in Egyptology, archaeology.
Well, he wasn't. In fact, that was actually kind of a joke they made in the film. There was like, you're just like your dad did this. He's just in it for the money. Like his dad found stuff, and now there's a Egypt rush, and he's just there for the money, like the investment of it, the adventure of it. So that actually makes sense. It's like Indiana Jones has a kid, and he's just like the iconicness of Indiana Jones is what he's in it for, not actually the archaeology. He's just there because it's popular.
Yeah, I mean, I would just kind of either really play into that, or I would make him more of like an Egypt guy.
Either make him Egypt, or just ham it up even more. Like
ham it up even more. Like maybe he is like a complete screw up and stuff, and literally people brought him because his name was attached. His father refuses to go to Egypt, but they needed the name to give credibility to their research.
Right.
Make him the comic relief or something. Like do it that way, or make it to where he's trying to follow in his father's footsteps, but he really clearly is not as good as his father is.
Yeah, well, that was actually made pretty clear because they had to have the mummy actually get him the discovery.
Yeah,
but they kind of rushed through it too quick.
Yeah,
if they had him be there a little more, that actually goes into modern audiences too. His character actually has kind of an interesting premise. It actually is fairly similar to Brendan Fraser's character, where he's not the expert guy. He's just kind of brought into it because he knows something. Mm-hmm. Like, that's an interesting thing. Give him a little bit more time out in Egypt before he just gets shoehorned into the character role. Like, give him some more time. Give him some more character development before they bring him into into Cairo.
Well, and the other thing is like keep his character. Like if you really think about it, his whole veneer of being at all like an expert in archaeology or interested in Egyptology disappears the moment he has a love interest, and then he literally just becomes male love interest.
Yes.
And that's his character.
Male love interest number one.
Yeah, pretty much. So I think just keep his character a little bit more consistent, stuff like that. Like actually show why he's there. Explain why he's there a little bit more. If he really doesn't get into the Egyptology stuff or the archaeology side of it.
I like actually taking both of the things you said. Yeah. I like the idea of making him more into the Egyptology. Just make him more into it, but not as knowledgeable. So he's like a fan, like a nerd. Like he's really into the lore of the archaeology, but he's not really proficient at it. He's just doing it because his father's his name. But like he loves the glory of it. Like, oh, this is so cool. Look at all this stuff. Look how neat this is. Like it's a hobby for him rather than something he's really interested in, like his father was. Yeah. And that way you can keep it throughout the film where he's still really interested in this stuff, rather than just like he sees her and then he just doesn't care anymore.
Yeah. And it just keep the character. Like, don't change him entirely to... If you really, like, if you missed the very first part of the film and it just went straight into when he meets...
you wouldn't even know he was ever into that stuff to begin with.
You wouldn't even know that he was even there.
That's true.
Like, you wouldn't have known why he was there other than he is love interest.
Yeah, you could have just had it. You could have had his father still being there and him just accompanying him, and it wouldn't have mattered because it's like his character doesn't really matter until he falls in love with her, and then it's so poorly done it still doesn't give a lot of thought to.
Yeah.
Okay, so
that's why I say you just clean up the relationships, define the characters a little bit more, have a better romance, and fix some of the cutting issues.
So for modern audiences, other than some of the stuff we've already brought up with this, what other changes would you make to make this film like work for a modern audience? Because for me,
there's a couple.
The
things. Action
is pretty solid. Some of the scenes are pretty good. I'm thinking like, I mean, the set pieces even good. Like I watched this movie modernly. I'm like, this is pretty good.
I mean, it's the thing is that they're not bad films or anything like that, and sometimes we do fall into the trap of modern is better. Like, our modern approach is a lot better. Let's throw in some explosions, gunfire, and blah 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 blah. I want armies fighting armies.
That's so true.
You know, like we can fall into those traps when literally what makes the films great continues to make them great. It still would be very good films today.
What's also pretty actually amazing about this, and I was thinking about, like, it takes place in 1919 when they first, and then it's 20 years later, it's 1929, which means...
it's 1921 and 1931.
Oh, is it 1921?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, so it's like modern times when they're doing the film, when it does the time skip. Mm-hmm. It's actually was filmed at the time it was taking place.
Pretty much, yeah.
Which is actually a really interesting take on this, because films are still new, but this was still a time where they were still discovering the mummies and stuff.
Well,
so
yeah,
this was
they literally
current.
They literally reference the discovery of King Tut.
Yep.
And the fact that literally he's trying to find, his motivation in the beginning is to find something greater than King Tut. That's what he's looking for, and that's when the mummy kind of comes in and takes advantage of it. And it's like, oh, I have a sensational find. Or something. How does he he says something like that? Like,
yeah, he says, I know. He says,
I
know of something, and he gives them the artifact, and then points it out and says, well, we can't dig up our own. You guys can. And
yeah,
it's just a really interesting take on that whole thing. The mummy, I would leave that exactly the same.
Yeah,
the whole thing where he comes out as the mummy, but then he just dresses like a guy, and he's like, he's like just dressing normal, trying to fit in, is such a fun take. I don't think that's even really been done much in modern times, other than unless it's done comedically, because just taking the idea of the monster just trying to blend in, be like, I'm just one of you guys.
Well, the thing is that he's actually kind of convincing as blending in, like, you know, Count Dracula kind of does it to an extent. He's suave and all these different things. The mummy is not suave, and he comes off as an eccentric. He's a historian.
Yeah,
that's kind of how he plays.
He comes
it
out kind of closeted, kind of stoic, and it works so well. And that thing where he's just so well mannered,
mm-hmm.
and he's trying to fit in society. Is just such a fun take on the character. That is the one part that I would love to throw in a modern version of this and run with it. Something that actually would have been really cool if they'd have done with like the 2017 money, where it's like modern and they discover the money, and then like it just goes 10 years later, and then the mummy, she's just like hanging out with all the peeps, like
like she's just a perfectly fine modern woman. And blending into society, but she knows a lot about ancient Egypt and things like that. I think part of
such a clever premise that I would have loved to see. See more of, done with a modern take on it. Some of the modern techniques that we have and stuff that we could take with that would be really fun.
Yeah, I think like the only things that I would change as far as this film goes is just update the techniques that we're using. update some of the graphics and things like that. Once again, like I did with Dracula, I'm going to advocate that it takes place in the same time period that this one does. So 1921 to 1931, I think that the time period is perfect because that's when Egyptology is super, super big. It's super, super popular. And again, you get the limited technology and things like that. The supernatural things that are happening are almost, they're almost made bigger and stranger and more extravagant to lesser technologies and things like that.
Right.
So it appears grander and more terrifying. And
yep.
So I think that
some of the practical effects in this are just so good, and it just gives that strength of just proper cinematography. The problem is, I think that hurts modern films so much is they focus so much on fix it and post.
Yeah.
And they don't do as much of the film. The filming is done after the movie is put together after the filming rather than during the filming.
Yeah.
And it's just, this shows, and there's like, well, we want to have 1,000 takes. Well, these guys had to do it in like 1 or 2. Like, it's amazing how much they were able to do with so much less. And part of that is because they had to, so they made it work. But man, it's impressive.
It's impressive, and the thing
to this
too
day, it is impressive.
Well, and the other thing is they know what they're putting out. Like, that's the thing. Like, this could go into a completely different discussion, but like the fact that they're only taking 1 or 2 takes, they know exactly what kind of thing they're going to be putting out. And they know what type of film they're going to be doing. They have the entire thing planned out. They're shooting it in a very specific way for a very specific story. I think that sometimes in modern times, because we take so many takes, because we do so many different scenes, because we are so, it's so easy for us to just delete scenes that we don't think are necessary and things like that. The problem is that the actors remember the scenes, and they remember the deleted scenes, and they remember all these different things. And so when they go out and they're like, this film's absolutely fantastic, they look like they're just lying to our faces when the film flops.
Well, I mean, to be fair, a lot of these films were filmed like they were stage plays. And it shows, and they very much act like they're in front of a live audience, and they don't get another chance at this. Like, this is what there is. Yep. And there's just something to so many actors that come from like Broadway or just acting on stage in general that just have they carry themselves so well because you get one take.
Yep. And you get one chance, you get one shot.
A great example that I was just thinking of is like Patrick Stewart when he was on Next Generation. It was a show, but he acted like it was a stage play. He very much carried himself that way. And these actors and actresses who did this in the 1930s, it shows good and the bad, just like with our lead female. Like, she suffers greatly from an internal conflict, and it shows. Whereas in modern films, you can kind of skirt that a bit. And these ones, the attitudes going behind the scenes show so strongly in the film. And that's part of, I guess I could actually put this part of their iconicness, but also probably the ugliness that just kind of makes them what they are. Yeah. Is they are a product of the people, the times, and everything around them. All goes into that, and it shows. And any little thing, good or bad, will stand out greatly in a film like this because it's just right in your face.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Anyway, this has been Cinema Revisited. We talked today about The Mummy, 1932, starring Boris Karloff. We got into the good, the bad, the ugly, the iconic. And we talked a little bit about what we would do, not just to fix this film in the time period, but also how we would possibly change a couple of things to present it to a modern audience. Any closing thoughts, DJ, before I wrap it up?
I just want to say that we're 3 movies into this, and it has been an absolute blast watching these old films. I'm just seeing so many parallels and ideas that you can see in modern films that take these characters and where they get this stuff from. I'm just looking forward to seeing more of them and just seeing this, not just as an entertainment sport, but as a historical perspective of film and where these tropes and techniques and characters and iconic and ugliness and all that comes from these old films. It's really fun.
Absolutely. I'm having a blast doing these, like watching these old films and stuff like that. It is so cool that we have the opportunity to look at films like this and dive into them deeply, make fun of them a little bit, but also just appreciate them for what they are.
I think part of that is just because we've just become broken from our curb stomps, but
That's true.
honestly, they're a lot of fun to watch. So enjoy it. You know, if you find a copy of this film, give it a shot. You know, it's actually worth a watch, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. These films are definitely worth a watch if you can find copies of them. It is really, really cool. We have a box set from Universal that they released on the 100th anniversary of Universal. It's like a special Blu-ray box that has all of the Universal monster movies. If you can find that, that's what we're watching. That's the copies that we're doing. And apparently they actually remastered it and fixed the sound and did a bunch of different things to actually make it present as well as they possibly could. It's just so fun watching these. Anyway, so that is, as I said, Cinema Revisited. I hope that you guys liked this video, enjoyed our commentary, and I hope that we got you thinking about this a little bit too. In the comments, let us know if you've seen this movie, what you would do, what things you would take away and put into modern film, or what you hated about the film even. We'll take that. Otherwise, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Also follow us on Facebook at Entertainment Rebooted, and we also are on Twitter now at Exposition Sickle. So be sure to follow us there as well. Otherwise, again, thank you so much for watching. We really do appreciate you guys. And we'll see you guys in the next video.